Hello, and thank you for joining Growing Tech Fast, the condensed Org3D podcast where we talk about growing tech startups with those who have grown them. Today, I am joined with Ben Keller, the founder of RentDrop. It's really great to have you on the podcast today, Ben. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it is an absolute pleasure. So, Ben, for the benefit of our listeners, can you tell me a little bit about your mission with RentDrop and the work you're doing?
Sure. I started RentDrop last year with co-founder Remen, and our goal is to really improve the way in which you can pay for rent and collect rent as both a tenant and a landlord. It's one of the largest markets in the United States in terms of money transfer, but there really hasn't been a ton of advancement or improvement to the way in which it's completed in some time. And for something that almost every American goes through at some point in their life, paying rent, we wanted to take a stab at improving the way it's done.
Definitely so, and I think it is a really exciting opportunity for creating something a little bit better and being able to make that whole process so much easier. Seems like something that someone really should have done quite a while ago.
Yeah, definitely true. I think we're benefiting now from an advancement in certain technologies, especially in the payment space, that makes something like this possible. It is definitely not a small undertaking to try to continually transfer thousands of dollars of rent on schedule, and it's because of these underlying technologies that make it all possible.
Definitely so. So tell me a little bit about how RentDrop came about. Like, what kickstarted this journey for you?
Sure. I think it is the inevitable meeting of different paths I went on in my life. So I started off my career in private equity real estate, and I was charged with analyzing multi-property investments, and these were properties with thousands and thousands of units, to see if we could purchase it at a price, change the units in some way to improve our investment, and then sell it down the road and make the required rate of return that we were looking for. I didn't necessarily love the job, but I learned a lot about the real estate space and learned a lot about running a business, because a real estate property really is its own business. You have to learn marketing in terms of getting renters in. You have to learn operations and process to make sure that renters stay. And you have to think a lot about the financial aspect. And so it was an incredible learning experience for me. After that, I worked out in Silicon Valley at a fintech startup called Zenbanks, which was trying to improve the digital banking experience for people who traveled to different countries frequently. And it was an awesome idea, but these underlying technologies around the transfer of money and sort of the banking space in general just weren't developed enough yet. This was in 2013. But again, that experience was pretty transformative in my understanding of the fintech space, and kind of was another piece to the puzzle that led to RentDrop. And then finally, I spent my last 7 years at HubSpot, where I started in operations, learned a lot about subscription businesses, learned a lot about revenue retention, how to build out post-customer acquisition operational processes like support organizations, customer success. And then I spent the last 4 years at HubSpot on the product team, where I got to work on building out our CRM and a variety of other products. And so I understood the importance of a really good product and how to engage with engineers, engage with your customers, understand how to find product market fit, to structure an MVP. And then I met Remen, who is my now co-founder, who is a product manager at HubSpot, or who was a product manager at HubSpot alongside me. And he was a former founder, was looking to start another company, and we really hit it off. And he asked if we should go into business together. And it wasn't until a couple meetings later where I proposed the idea of improving the rental experience for the long tail of the rental market. So landlords who own anywhere between 1 to 5 units, and the tenants that accompany those landlords.
Brilliant. Yeah, it definitely sounds like your journey kind of gave you all these ideas to, start this business. You mentioned, your kind of co-founder having previous startup experience. Do you think that kind of aided you growing and kind of forming RentDrop?
Yeah, of course. I don't know if I would have had the guts to go out on my own. It definitely took Remen to convince me that I was capable of doing this, because I think, some people are definitely born with like the entrepreneurial gene where you just seek it out. And I have thought about it. My dad's an entrepreneur, my sister's an entrepreneur. And I guess I just didn't have the motivation or the confidence that I personally could do it. And with Remen's guidance of like even something as simple of him going out and creating an incorporation before, like something that I had no experience with, just led me to believe that we could do this. So absolutely.
Definitely so. And, do you think that's given you the spark now to come up with other ideas and get kind of stuck into the market?
I think one thing at a time. We really want to see this project out. But, it definitely, even now, I'm over a year in, which is still so early on, but I already know many things that I would do differently, whether if I could go back in time or, in a venture in the future, how I would just approach it differently.
Definitely so. And I think that's something that everyone in the startup space can definitely understand is, you do something right and you think, yeah, this is going really well. And then you probably need to redo it a million times over. So yeah, it's definitely a good learning curve. Now you mentioned there, obviously, kind of you've been doing RentDrop now for just over a year. So, founded in 2020. Do you think starting your business during what was probably quite a difficult time for a lot of people, kind of during the pandemic, what kind of effect do you think that had on you starting RentDrop?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there were two important factors that came with the pandemic that were actually beneficial to us starting. So the first factor was didn't necessarily have to do with the pandemic, but RentDrop had been really successful, and Remen and I had been there long enough where we had gotten enough stock options where we could start funding the business ourselves. And so HubSpot definitely succeeded through the pandemic, and that helped our ability to fund the company early on. And two, Remen and I worked pretty hard, and when we were in the office, we would make a lot of excuses to stay in the office. A lot of people, whether you were staying late to just grab beers after work or to work on, another problem, it didn't necessarily provide the freedom with commute, et cetera, to work a lot of nights and weekends on this project while we were still employed. With the pandemic, taking those, hour and a half commute out of the equation, we could really invest once we shut off the HubSpot Slack in working through the night and on weekends on this project. And I don't think that really would have been possible because our real lives would have gotten in the way. And so being hunkered down in our apartments, it gave us the time to do it.
Definitely. And I think that's a really great opportunity that, like you say, not a lot of people would get. And, unfortunately, you probably wouldn't have got that apart from the pandemic. So it's a really great opportunity. What do you think the hardest thing about starting during the pandemic was?
So one of the hardest parts starting during the pandemic was getting out and meeting with our future target customers, both landlords and tenants. I think that we, did the best we could in scheduling Zoom interviews, Google Meet interviews, finding people on LinkedIn. But Boston is such an incredible place where Remen and I both live to meet landlords and tenants. There's thousands of them, a lot of universities, a lot of these independent landlords, and being on the ground would have been super helpful for us. And then secondly, being able to go to meetups and trying to get a CTO, and maybe we'll talk about that later on, but that was a pivotal moment for us, neither of us being technical, trying to find a CTO we trusted. Early on, we were using outsourced dev found on Upwork to build our product. And we didn't have the level of visibility that we were used to working at HubSpot into how the product was being put together. And it led to a lot of issues down the road when we started to hire people in-house. And hiring a full remote team is just, there's challenges with that when you've never met
Yeah.
these people in person.
Definitely so. I can, really imagine that that's a big issue. And I think quite a few people have seen that definitely in the kind of fintech space at the moment is it's hard to get that balance. We've essentially opened the market up to a lot more of a wider market than it used to be. I think it brings pros and cons, definitely.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. And I think hiring is definitely the hardest piece. In Boston, we have such a rich engineering pool to pull from. And before, when people were usually required to be in person, having that pool in our backyard as, this great new startup that had just been funded with, an experienced entrepreneur, Remen, and myself who had a lot of experience at HubSpot, would have definitely been attractive. But so many companies now can hire and tap into this Boston pool of engineers. And it made it incredibly competitive to try to find some of our early hires.
Definitely so. And I know we touched on this briefly, and you said there's definitely things that you would do differently if you were starting
Sure.
rent drop all over. What would that be? What would that look like?
Yeah, so we actually changed our what the target market we were going after was. So, when we looked at the space, we knew there was this subset of the property technology space called property management software. There's Buildiums, Appfolio, et cetera. And we felt there wasn't a really compelling solution. A lot of the products just didn't have a great look and feel to them from an aesthetic standpoint. The go-to-market and the way that they attracted landlords was sort of a bit, early 2000s, early SaaS. And they were a SaaS product. A lot of landlords don't like having the cost of software eat into their already slim margins. And we felt we could disrupt that. We're great product managers. We can build a really slick, easy to use tool. What I think we realized down the road was these people have been working in this space for tens of years, and marketing to the customers in the same way, building a similar product that executes similarly. Maybe it looks better. Maybe it's easier to use. You're probably going to get the same results, right? Like, even if you do it marginally better, if you approach something the same way as people before you, you're probably going to get the same results. Yeah. And we took, a step back and looked at the market and said, a lot of this pain is felt on the tenant side, and no one's actively going after tenants independently. They are just a sub user on the overall landlord account. And without being able to go to them, it's like saying Uber just went after taxis to build an app that allowed them to find riders easier, not targeting the riders and creating this pool of riders so that now new drivers could be created in this market. And so there was a lot to unpack there on the tenant side, both from the pain they were feeling and solving it in a unique way. That Gen Z is about to enter this world of renting, and none of the products resonate with them in the way that they use technology. There was just a huge opportunity of going direct at the tenants, but also having a way for landlords to benefit from our product as well. And I think we would have targeted that side first versus going landlords and then to tenants.
Definitely so. And I think obviously what you're saying about Uber really resonates. And I think that explains very well, like you're saying, people, kind of your younger generations coming into the market definitely need that platform and something that they're used to using and they're used to dealing with, because, a lot of people aren't used to the typical ways that people deal with renting.
Yeah. It's definitely, it's a really exciting opportunity for us. I think what excites us the most about this opportunity with the tenants is there are just some standards with renting that people have just come to assume are to be true, like almost as if it's a scientific law that it just always is this way. A perfect example of this is paying on the first of the month and paying your rent monthly. It is the largest expense in a majority of people's expense, overall umbrella of expenses. And the fact that you have to pay once a month is largely based in rent checks was the only way rent was paid, or cash, for so long. And collecting a check every week was painful, both writing it and collecting it as the landlord. So you wanted to pay monthly, but that's just not the world we live in anymore. And so why can we not match your payment inflow, if you get paid weekly, to your payment outflow when it comes to renting? Why can't we help you out there? And on the landlord side, why can't we give you access to a year's rent up front? Why can't we give you access to a year's rent up front? We'll take some percentage of that for paying you a year's worth of rent up front. We'll inherit those contracts, and you can go build out your portfolio, because now you have a year's worth of your promised ARR up front. And so we look at Pipe, which does this in the SaaS space, and say, a year rent contract is similar to a year subscription for a SaaS product. We could do similar things in terms of the payment technology.
Very much. And I think, touching on kind of subscriptions, there's a lot of businesses now really realizing how they can apply this model of a subscription to their businesses. And I think it's very much kind of part of the future, like modeling kind of subscription into that kind of payments process.
Yeah, so I don't, like, one of the things that we have truly believed in is that, and we learned this with HubSpot's free CRM, is I think in this space, it has to be a freemium product. So landlords already contribute a ton of capital to their investment properties in fixing repairs, in marketing their properties, in their mortgage, the taxes, the utilities. Tenants, it's by far the biggest expense in their life. Like, what other expense is $2,000 a month? And so I don't think it makes sense there's already enough money being exchanged. It doesn't necessarily make sense to tap on a monthly subscription for the service. Where I think we benefit is taking a cut of the money that they're already spending. So if you are purchasing renter's insurance and your landlord requires it, which most do in the States, you can click one time, get your renter's insurance policy through RentDrop, and we get a 10% cut of the whole policy. And so you are not spending any more money. We're just making it more convenient. And that's kind of how we've based our pricing is that way.
Definitely so. And I think that's a really attractive quality from kind of both the renting and, like, tenant point of view, is to be able to do that, like you say, essentially free of charge. You get this benefit from both sides without that extra cost. I think that's a really great thing to have. Now, touching a little bit on kind of your development journey, let's say, what do you think the biggest thing is that you've learned while developing RentDrop that you think you're going to carry forward into, other ventures developing RentDrop?
Wow, yeah. So I think there are two pieces to this. I think one, in terms of personal, is it's really pushed me to get out of my comfort zone and do things that I sort of shied away from before. Reaching out and asking people for money was something that I didn't do really ever. Figuring out taxes for a company to pay someone who works for us in California. Like, these are things that definitely scared me in the past. And just going into it, I'm going to have the confidence next time to know I can do these things because I've done it before. So definitely in terms of personal development, just the confidence that you can tackle pretty much all of this stuff if you just put your mind to it. And then from a tactical or strategic standpoint, Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn, is famous for saying, if you're not embarrassed by your first product release, you launched too late. And I think as much as I have read that before and heard that several times, I definitely fell victim to not wanting to be embarrassed by my first release.
Yeah.
And both with being a perfectionist with how it looked, with trying to bake in a bit too many features, I would have worked a bit harder in taking some of the things out of the product to just get some eyes on it. Because once we got eyes on it, people actually using it, the things we learned, it was incredible. Yeah. And we could never have learned that sitting in a room talking to each other.
Definitely so. I think, I was speaking to someone the other day in regards to kind of like startup world, and we very much were saying, if you're starting a business, like if you're not failing, then you are failing, because, there's always something that needs changing and needs updating.
It's so true.
No, 100%. So I know we touched briefly on culture a little bit before, but I mean, I know after your time at HubSpot, you really realized that kind of to create this successful business was kind of through culture. So tell me a little bit about how you've, taken this into consideration when starting Rent Drop.
Oh, yeah. I think if, HubSpot has been incredibly successful. And I can't imagine you could attribute that success to any one more important component than culture. Like I think having been there for so long, it is what made everyone want to stay. It is what made everyone work harder. It is what had our customers feeling like taken care of. Like it permeated out to our customers where they felt the effects of the culture. And it wasn't a smokescreen. There weren't unfulfilled promises at all. Like it was not anything that was words on a deck or an acronym. The culture was, you felt taken care of at every turn. And I think the two most important things I learned was, one, culture is top down. Words on a deck, acronyms, as I just mentioned, will not work unless your founders and leaders are the ones living up to them the most. Whether, transparency is something on your culture. If they're not the most transparent, those words mean nothing. And where those words come into place and the outline that you've created, it's great for communicating what you expect from your employees when they're there. And it's a great tool for recruiting as a framework to screen people, say, do they fit these bullet points on our culture? Because if they don't, then it's going to be an uphill battle to work with this individual, because they're going to be at odds with what we're doing. And so our culture acronym is IMPACT. Inspire excellence, make a difference every day, use good judgment, act with empathy, communicate openly, and take risks. And I think the two that we care the most about are make a difference every day. You don't have to build the most amazing thing or solve this problem today. But if you make progress every day, it does not matter how small. If you can, shut your laptop at the end of the day and say, I definitely made progress. We went forward. And you get excited about that. That is something we absolutely look for. And then take risks. We want everyone to speak up if they think we could be doing something better, and to take risks and to come up with ideas. This cannot be just Remen and I and Nick, our CTO, coming up with all the ideas and everyone executing. It really, everyone has to be risk takers in a way. And we have means to make sure that we don't take risks as a organization in a way that's going to get us into trouble. But each employee should be excited to take risks.
Definitely. And I think that, ties in what you were saying about transparency, I think the ability to take risks comes from knowing that your opinions are going to be taken on and they're going to be listened to. And that transparency from, I think, leaders such as, yourself and the rest of the team to be open about responding to those, I think is so important.
Yeah. There's a great video that Dharmesh Shah, who's the co-founder of HubSpot, and someone I absolutely look up to, he posted a really good clip on his YouTube channel where he talks about culture. And one of the more important things is transparency. And a lot of leaders fall into the trap of not wanting to communicate the bad things. And it's not because you're trying to hide it from them or pretend like you're something you're not. You don't want them worrying. But if you're at every turn open and honest, then they know exactly the situation they're in. And if they believe in the mission, they're going to go above and beyond, or do something like maybe say, hey, cut my salary if we need more money, or do something crazy like that, because they know you're being honest and open with them, and they want to be a part of that.
Definitely. And I think it's a really big thing to take into a startup. It's a bit of a risk sometimes getting into a startup. So having that transparency there and, knowing what you're getting into is always so valued. And I think personally for me, that's something that really kind of got me wanting to work into a startup and wanting to work into, that smaller business model.
Yeah.
So do you think kind of like the culture in tech is much different to kind of other businesses that we may have out there?
It was definitely different than my time in private equity. It was, at first, it felt like you were drinking a bit of Kool-Aid, the parties, the casual dress code. And I think there's place for both. You were definitely getting paid for maybe the worst culture in private equity. The salary is a bit better than in tech. But I personally think that the shift in culture to inclusivity, into trying to find people of diverse backgrounds, not just color or race, but not necessarily looking down on a resume that's not coming from an Ivy League school, has brought in a lot of talent that you wouldn't expect to be talent otherwise. And I think that's one really great thing from the tech culture, of not really caring about resumes in the traditional sense that maybe banking or finance has cared about those things. Also, like, we spend so much time at work, and if it's not a place you enjoy being, like, I loved the free coffee at HubSpot. We're a startup, we can't afford that stuff now, and our culture has to come from really taking care of our people from an emotional perspective, and making sure we're good friends and they're building relationships, like offering them what we can. But we spend too much of our time at work for it to be a place where you don't necessarily want to be. And I think that tech has really done that. And that's why so many people gravitate to these big companies that, like Facebook and Google, where the culture and the experience you have while you're there is it's exciting and it's incredible.
Definitely so. I think it is something that really attracts so many people to the tech world. But what do you think kind of like the key parts of RentDrop's culture is that stands out? If you had to pick one, what would you kind of take away, and what would you want people to focus on?
Yeah. So I talked about making a difference every day and taking risks. I think the one thing that it might not appear on our slide deck, but it's how each other is great at listening. The sort of lack of micromanaging, that's something that Rem and Nick and I absolutely want no part of. We feel that everyone has an equal right to come up with ideas. And so every one of our meetings feels so collaborative, and we arrive at a conclusion in a way where everyone was really a part of getting us there. And secondly, like the way in which we treat customers, and this is something else I learned at HubSpot, where your support in the way in which you answer questions and offer help to your customers is a game changer in your success. It's not just about the quality of the product or the pizzazz of the brand. It's the way that the company makes you feel and treated as a customer. And even though we're a free product and we might not have dedicated support for in the long run, just the way in which we think about our customers, one of our number one metrics we track is time it takes to solve a bug. We must solve every bug in under 8 hours. Some can't be solved in under 8 hours, but we need to at least have a resolution plan and communicate that to the customer. And that's the most important metric we look at every single month, is how well we did against that.
Amazing. No, definitely. I think it can be agreed, definitely from my side and yours, that, the kind of culture that you are putting across is very attractive from both sides. And I think it makes people, like you say, want to come to your company from both candidate and, customer sides. So kind of just to finish off now, I personally think, obviously, RentDrop's a great company. I think it's a really good opportunity to help out this rental market. But what do you think the future of RentDrop looks like?
Yeah, I definitely think we're more of a fintech business, I think, looking into the future. And I think that at every turn, so we have four pillars. We have, when it comes to making a payment, the who can make a payment. Traditionally, it's just the tenant, maybe a parent if you're in college and they're helping with your rent. The how, traditionally check. The when, again, traditionally once a month, and the value you get from that. So right now it's just a roof over your head. We aim to build up those four pillars until there's a lot of meat on in each of them. For who can help you pay rent, if it's not just you, whether it's making it easy for employers to contribute if they're relocating you, or fans if you're an influencer, or if you're trying to raise money for your rent, or your parents contributing. The how right now, check, but ACH, credit card, crypto, however you want to pay. The when, so breaking it up so that you can come up with payment schedules that more fit you as long as you're making rent. And then the value, building your credit score. Almost 90% of renters do not build their credit score with rent because the landlords don't report it, because it's a lot of work. But we can do that. It could be earning money in other ways on renting. It could be saving money is another way when renting. And so building out the value prop that you're not just getting a roof over your head when you're spending this. So I think each one of those we're taking a look at and figuring out how we can improve it. And so the future of RentDrop is, we're a company that is going to change the way in which Gen Z will experience paying their rent. And they really won't have ever had a different experience besides RentDrop, is our hope.
Definitely so, and I think I can definitely see that in your future, definitely. So it's been such a lovely pleasure speaking to you and hearing your story, and essentially getting a little bit more of your wisdom after starting up your own startup. So that is all we have time for this week. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Lauren, thank you so much for having me.
No worries. So thank you to everyone listening, and make sure to tune in next time for Growing Tech Fast.